Hello, everyone. My name is Raquel Reina, and I'm going to share my OBE, SDE, and spiritual awakening in a depth that I've never shared before on my channel, and how it led me to my human design career that I am living today, human design teacher. I'm actually a weaving of spiritual principles on human design. I have a human design school. I teach a certification program and help people utilizing spiritual tools to assist them in living a life where they're free to be themselves. But I've never in depth shared the spiritual awakening that I have had that led me here to this work. The desire to share my story really began when I was publishing my first book, Are You a Mutant? The publishers sent me to be interviewed on several podcasts. One of them was called Jeff Mara, and he interviewed me about my spiritual experience and the birthing of my first book. And I very briefly went into my story and shared more about human design. But what happened was I got introduced to his channel. So, hour upon hour, I got obsessed with NDEs, near death experiences. Now, I've always been into Dolores Cannon. I've heard Raymond Moody. I've done a lot of research on the topic. So, I was familiar with NDEs, but I didn't realize there were so many people having these experiences. And every day I heard more and more experiences. And I dug deeper into the phenomenon. And then I heard people sharing about their shared death experiences, their out of body experiences. And then in other channels, people sharing about their spiritual awakenings. And it made me realize that all of these experiences that I've been had are worth sharing. Some of the experience came with very specific messages to bring out to humanity that for whatever reason, even though I'm in the field, I'm a human design teacher, spiritual teacher, I never share the depth of my experiences because so many people roll their eyes when I start talking about it or kind of chuckle as I begin sharing the experiences. So I've pushed them down. But when I listened to everyone's story, I felt and realized that the desire to push it down was across the board. Everyone was afraid to share their story. And then also across the board was the transformations that happened in real life because of their experience. So, this is sort of something you just can't debate. If your life gets better because you've had a spiritual awakening, you're able to instantaneously heal something, free yourself from addiction, heal injuries in the bodies, heal yourself from disease. This is what we want in life. We want to be able to heal, to get better, to feel free, to feel better. And my spiritual awakening did just that for my life. And I realized that it was necessary for me to share. Now, this is a long, deep, rich story that has a lot of twists and turns. And so I'm going to go through the entire story for the first time right here and try my best to articulate some things that are very, very hard to share. So I want to start with my spiritual awakening. Now, many people have heard my story about being in college, reading all of the Carlos Castaneda books, going to bed, praying for my shamanic Nagual teacher, waking up the next day and being introduced to someone teaching the Toltec wisdom. It happened to be Don Miguel's son. He introduced me and said, "Your teacher is Don Miguel." I went and studied with him for many years in his living room before he was famous. He's the author of the Four Agreements. And that led me on journeys to travel all over the world and have experiences in the shamanic realm, which were life changing. But that was just the beginning. And usually that's where my story ends because most people know the Four Agreements. They know Don Miguel and they can kind of relate. But what happened after that was Don Miguel was a powerful shaman. And reading his book doesn't do it justice. Like, he changed the room when you walked in, but he was not in integrity. He was doing things that to me screamed unenlightened. He was having relations with the students, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to go into all of his dirty laundry, but I was a seeker and I wanted to see an enlightened person. I don't know why I was driven to want to see this, but I wanted to meet an enlightened teacher. Now, at that time, I was surrounded by very powerful shamans and many people that were on the spiritual path, and many people that were studying with different gurus and going to different workshops and this type of thing. And a woman started to come to me in my dreams. Now, at this time, I was living in San Francisco. I was a performance artist in a multimedia performance group, dance, music, kind of like a mini Cirque du Soleil. And I thought I was studying the law of attraction and manifesting, and I was, but also I was drinking too much, dating a narcissist, and indulging in lots of substances, the Burning Man lifestyle. And I was having a food addiction and not very healthy in my manifesting and in my living my best life. On the outside, I looked very successful. The performance group was doing very well. We opened for bands like Jane's Addiction and performed at the Cow Palace. We had a cult following. Many people loved what we were doing. We were in a book and we influenced a lot of artists at that time in San Francisco. But it was a superficial accomplishment and it wasn't bringing me fulfillment, and he didn't really understand why. So, meanwhile, I'm having dreams of a woman who was an enlightened teacher. She's coming to me in the dreams, speaking to me. One dream was me sitting in front of a panel that said, "Why are you in this career? You think you've accomplished so much. Well, here's what you get." And she like patted me on the head, like, "Good job, good job." And, in my mind, as an artist and a dancer, I was at the top of my game. I'd created all these things and it was such a big deal. And I woke up and I realized, wow, this is not really what my soul is longing for. My soul wants something so much bigger. So the next thing I began to realize is one of my friends had met a woman they said was enlightened, that people were coming from all over the world to listen to her speak. And she didn't charge for her work. So you couldn't pay to get a session with her. You had to request a session with the woman who was managing her, I guess, working with her. And if she was guided by spirit to give you a session, she would give you one. Now, this woman didn't charge for her work, so there was no manipulation with money at all. And yet, people were giving her money and giving her homes. The woman who was kind of managing her schedule gave her a mansion in Temecula where she was living at the time because Spirit had guided this very, very wealthy woman to use her money for Spirit and to donate it. And she chose to work with this woman. She had two mansions in Temecula, very wealthy woman. And the woman's name, the enlightened woman's name was Anne. And I put in a request to do a session with her. One of my friends was very close with her. And so the next thing I know, I'm invited to the mansion where I stayed for free overnight. And they fed me, and it was filled with crystals, filled with Buddhas. It was like being in an Atlantean mansion dimension. Now, the night before meeting this woman, I was in the darkest shadow, so much fear. Am I worthy? These are all the things I've done, so much self doubt. I couldn't sleep the whole night. I was in the bathtub praying, please help me clear this. Please, God, give me what I need to have the strength to stand up to meet this woman. And the next morning, I woke up and walked into the living room. And it was literally as though somebody unzipped my soul and my body, my mind, my spirit became the ocean, the oneness. And all I felt was love, and all I saw was white. All of my questions were answered like in an instant. I started having visions of past lives. She sat with me for 3 hours and outlined my entire life. At the time, I was the leader of this dance company, and there were 12 people in the dance company. And she said, "This is your awakening, beloved. This is the awakening of the Christ consciousness. And these symbolically are the 12 disciples." And she went through each person in the dance company and what their role was, and how this is the birthing of my higher dimensional self. But she also didn't tell me to leave the dance company. But that's what the message was, that it was time for me to leave. I knew it was going to hurt a lot of people because we'd been working our whole lives, blood, sweat, and tears to this level of success. To get to this level of success, we were performing for, the Macy's passport event with Hedgewood and the Inch cast was there, and um, Sharon Stone. There was thousands of people. And that was performance came after my session with her. And I realized at the height of this career, I needed to leave. Now, I had mentioned that I had a session with this enlightened teacher, and everyone in the group thought I was having a Christ complex, a Jesus complex, deemed me as insane and crazy. And I became scapegoated when I left and kicked off the pedestal in a human design line 5 way. But so much happened before that. So, this first session with this enlightened woman was the first time I feel that I had a spiritual awakening to that degree, where I became the infinite ocean. And many people in NDEs explain this. Many people explain the feeling of being in the state of love, in the sea of love, in that place where they're held, in that place where they're so loved. And this woman was able to take me into that state. And then, of course, I came back into my personality and came back into the world that I was in. And the drinking too much, the narcissism boyfriend, the um, being a little wild and out of control. And my life was never going to stay the same after cracking it that wide open. Now, the difference between that as a spiritual awakening and an NDE is that I attributed it to this woman. So, part of my journey since then has been to reclaim that the energy was mine, my experience, my connection to the other world, and that we are all one. And she was merely a reflection of what was inside of me. And the experience of being in that frequency, my whole life began to fall apart up there in San Francisco. There was no way that I could continue to abuse my body. You know, dancers are like the worst, actually, as far as abusing their body. They smoke in order to keep their weight down. And there was no way that I could live in that world. I began healing myself, healing the relationships that I was in, healing my body. My world began to change. So that was the first spiritual awakening. And then the shared death experience came when, yes, I left the boyfriend that I was with. It was very toxic situation. I had found out, I had fallen for him and found out that he was a heroin addict. So when you're from the San Fernando Valley, you move up north to San Francisco, you don't really know what heroin addiction looks like. You know what cocaine addiction is, people partying a lot. But to see somebody in a full blown heroin addiction was very, very dark. So during this time, my very last performance, I was performing on a trapeze. So, yes, I was doing trapeze at the time, and I had some hairspray on my hands. And during the performance, I fell. And, mind you, this 2 years earlier, one of my friends had fallen from a trapeze, broke her neck, and died. So, falling from a trapeze is a pretty intense thing to do. To do it in a performance in front of a full audience. Luckily, I did not hurt anyone. I fell on myself on the ground on the hardwood floor. Luckily, the trapeze was not a high trapeze. Now, my friend who had died was a high trapeze. This was a low trapeze and maybe about 12 feet. And I fell on my back and I knocked out for a moment, and then the room went white. And I felt wings of an angel pick up my body so that I could get up off of the floor. And somehow I managed to literally just leave the theater and walk out the front door. And my roommate at the time's car was literally in front of the theater, and the door was open. And I walked in and sat in the front seat, and something had taken over my body to allow me to walk. And I got home and then went on my bed and couldn't move or put pressure on my back for the next 2 weeks. But 2 days after the fall, my roommate walked in the room. She was crying and she said, "Oh my God, honey, you're not going to believe this, but Gabe died 2 nights ago." So Gabe was the heroin addict ex-boyfriend. And the night he died was the night that I fell. And I began to realize at that moment that the experience that I had with the angel moving through my body was the moment that he was dying. And the realization came to me as I was in this bed, unable to move for 2 weeks. Why was I able to walk? Why did I get up off the floor and then not be able to walk? And so I started having visions of him and feeling him and being present with that energy. Finally, when I was able to go to his house and help kind of clean up some of the things on when I walked into the room, it felt like a miracle had happened there. And on his wall was a picture of the Christ, Jesus, with a heart, and there were wings coming from behind it, saying the purity of heart. And this is not a person who was religious. I never heard him talk about Jesus or Christianity. He was not openly religious at all. And so I felt there was a deep transformative journey with his soul. But this isn't the end of the experience. So after this, I began to realize my life was completely over in San Francisco. It couldn't, my body did have also a spontaneous healing. So as I was laying in the bed before going into his room, I brought in some shamans that I knew. I had people lay their hands on me, and I did have a spontaneous healing in my body where I could walk, I could run. I mean, I don't know. I was in my 20s and I was in incredible shape. So, I just chalked it up to like, wow, I was in great shape and I bounced back. But I knew that I could never perform after that. That was the end. That was the last show. That was my hurrah. And Anne then invited me to live with her in the mansion for indefinitely. It ended up being 2 years that I got to live with this enlightened teacher for 2 years. And during this time, the experiences that happened literally were unbelievable. And I try and explain to people these experiences. She could manifest money out of the air. She was not of this world. She could bilocate. And I got to be there for 2 years with her. In the second night after I left San Francisco, packed up my car, took my Miata, drove down to San Diego, Temecula, lived with her, and there were other people there in the house. And then we moved into another house. But, anyways, the point is, I stayed with her for 2 years. The second night I was there, she and I were in the living room, and I looked over, and Gabe was standing in the room. So he was wearing exactly the outfit that I saw him in last. His smile, his eyes. The room again turns this hazy white. Anne is with me, so I think she's able to hold the vibration, the frequency, and because it was the three and there was an enlightened teacher there witnessing, we were able to hold in this vibration. And I said, I can't do this. I can't see you like this. And he said, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And he walked over to me and he literally puts his hand on my face. And he says, I'm here to teach you that separation is just an illusion. And then he walked back and like kind of vanished in the air and spent a lot of time processing this with Anne. And she said that he was given a choice at the time of his overdose and he chose to leave. And we went through his entire life. And she said that your relationship with him, which I didn't go into all the drama of like when we first met, then I found out he was an addict, and then the codependence and all the things, me questioning my sanity, whether I was just a complete loser, like how could I be with a heroin addict? Why am I with him? I'm an enabler, I'm a this, I'm a that. Like really doubting who I am as a person. And she confirmed that the entire relationship was set for this experience where he transitioned, was able to vibrationally come to the point where I could vibrationally meet him and we could have that experience together. And that was our contract, that I was able to be open enough to reach him and he was able to reach down enough to provide me with that message. And since that time, I've had so many beautiful experiences with him, so many beautiful communications and moments of connection. And it opened me up to the other side. So, also, when my mom died and my dad died, I had similar shared death experiences with both of them. And I'm not a medium. I cannot just talk to the other side, but I am connected. Today, filming this is 9/11, and my mom transitioned on 9/11, 9 years ago. And I always feel her vibration and her frequency around this time. And it felt like it was the other side that was really pushing me to open the door to honor all of these experiences that I've had, to honor my journey and to speak of it in a way that maybe if anyone else has had these experiences and they try and tell people and they get the eye roll, you can honor your connection. And what also makes my experiences different is that because they're more subtle, the spiritual awakenings are more subtle. And because it came from another person, it was very easy for me to discount. Oh, that came from her. Oh, this happened. And the subtlety is very important because the NDEs cause a lot of trauma for people to wake up. And it also, when I began my journey leaving San Francisco, I did a lot of therapy. I went and got my master's in spiritual psychology. I healed myself from any eating disorder, any addictions, and any drinking. I started eating, you know, green juices, vegan, and then I, did changed my diet and got into the healing modalities and healed myself. And I used this spiritual momentum as a step by step guide to go from the ocean to the drop of water where I'm in a very dense personality. And then I had to work my way back to the vibration of the ocean through dedication, through discipline, through awareness, through honoring my journey. And it's taken me a long time. So the trapeze fall was in the year 2000. So I also had an out of body experience that I want to share when I was living with Anne. So, like I said, her experiences, I'll probably make another video just on her and the many, many experiences that she had as an enlightened woman. It's very rare. I have seen many spiritual teachers, the spiritual teachers who did my program, the University of Santa Monica, Ron and Mary Holnick, were amazing. And they clearly said, we're not enlightened, we're not gurus, we're just spiritual teachers integrating spiritual knowledge. I also saw Michael Beckwith many times. I lived in LA while he was doing Agape, and he was an amazing channel. But this woman literally lived completely out of the reality that we are in. She could bend matter. The world changed around her. And she said that most of the spiritual teachers who are making money, who are online, who are on YouTube, they're in the spiritual halfway house, which means they're still driven by fame, driven by money, having sex with their students. She laughed about it. She said they're having a fabulous time. But once you taste the divine nature, you'll never go back. So I was shown this to know what is possible. And we're in this time of great awakening. It's speeding up, and there's instantaneous knowing, instantaneous spiritual awakenings available. And she said that she woke up because of the time that we are in, and that we are in a very important process. So, me having the subtlety and the discipline and the work was very important, because those of you out there who haven't had an NDE, it's not like you can say, oh, I'd like to have an NDE, so I'm going to run my car into this brick wall. Like, you can't do that. But if you're someone who's prone to spiritual awakening, you can actively take steps, actively work towards the awakening, actively move yourself in higher and higher states of consciousness through healing, through awareness, through intentional mindset. So the out of body experience was, I was taking a nap in the living room and I woke up and I was looking around the room And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Because I looked down on the couch and saw my body asleep. So I touched my body, and it was the strangest experience I have ever had. It was like a lump of heavy weighted rags. And I thought, this is it. I'm out of body. And this is part of shamanic training, is to be in a different, in a dream body. It's something that there's a lot of tools and teachings on um, out of body experiences. So I decided to walk around the house, and Anne saw me and opened her door and said, I'm here to show you what I'm birthing on this planet. So her awakening happened by a physical appearance from St. Francis of Assisi. He appeared to her in physical form. She was a professor in a university, and she thought she was having a mental breakdown. And so she went to a psychiatrist, and luckily, the psychiatrist said, no, you're having a spiritual awakening. Next time he comes, ask him what he wants. So she did. And he began to work with her in physical form for 2 years. Now, at this moment, when I opened up her bedroom, I opened up her door and she invited me into the bedroom. She said, now St. Francis and I are birthing something on the earth plane. And it was a child that was a combination of St. Francis of Assisi and Anne's energy birthed on the planet. It was a child. Now, this child was not something I ever saw with her. She just said she had constant connection to St. Francis of Assisi, and that's why she always knew where to go, what to do. She was just 100% guided by that frequency. And I will share some of at least one story after this of things that happened with her. But I never saw a child. I could only see it in this vibrational frequency when I was out of body. And they sat down and told me all of the things that they were birthing on the planet. And the main message was that the second coming of Christ is happening now. Living as the Christ vibration is the collective consciousness of Christ, which means that we are all now able and available to reach into the vibrational frequencies of that divine Christ frequency of love. And in that divine Christ frequency of love, what you have is the ability to heal, the ability to see other people without judgment, to see them as the one ocean, and to let them live their lives without judgment in your mind, to be able to transcend when you are in the illusion of separation, including the illusion of scarcity, the illusion that we have any control over what happens to us, the illusion that we are victims of our life, and to vibrate in the frequency of love. And there are tools and techniques to enable each and every one of us to step into this vibrational frequency now. And this is what Anne was preparing for, and what her and baby St. Francis of Assisi were sharing with me when I was out of body in her room. Now, every time I go to tell people this story, I've literally gotten so many, sure. Oh, really? Uh-huh. And so I've pushed it down for so long. And I realize now is the time. 9/11, today is the day for me to bring this message out to the world and to share with each and every one of you that now is the time, and that you don't need to have an NDE to get there. You can get there step by step. And then what begins to happen is the new vibrational frequency is heaven on earth vibes, where you move into a place of simplicity. You move into a place of loving your life as it is. You move into a place of letting everyone be who they are, letting go of control. Now, I wanted to share with you one of the experiences that happened with this amazing woman, Anne. She was completely connected to the divine source at every second. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anyone this enlightened. And like I said, I've seen a lot of spiritual teachers. She would just immediately get a download. She needs to go to the airport. She doesn't know why. She doesn't know how. She'd go to the airport and there would be an airline ticket in her name, and she would just be flown somewhere. And one time she was flown to work with Clinton. She was contacted by Oprah and refused to be on public television. She said, no, that level is not ready for this energy or this light. She could not be controlled. And the work she did with Clinton was he didn't even know about it. She was just given a pass and a room in a suite right next door to his suite. And she was holding the vibrational frequency in the room next to his, and he didn't even know. She was gone for like 3 or 4 weeks and then came back. We're like, who sent the ticket? She didn't know. Well, who paid for the hotel? She didn't know. This is just one experience that we witnessed over and over again. So after trying to integrate all of her teachings, my life really fell apart. It was not rainbows and flowers and doves for the last 20 years, trying to integrate what happened to me. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of pain, a lot of healing. And on the practical day-to-day life, I had a lot of trouble trying to integrate what I had witnessed, especially being a person that didn't have a lot of tools on the earth plane. I'm spiritual, I'm creative, I was an artist. I was not an accountant. I didn't have a lot of skills that made money. I did get lucky to work for a women's fitness facility for many years. I was able to climb the corporate ladder during the last, now it's been over 10 years since I left that company, but So we're talking about 2 decades here. So for one of those decades, I was able to climb a corporate ladder in a safe enough environment for a spiritual person, but I did push my spiritual tools down pretty radically in order to pay the bills. And luckily, I came across human design, found out I was a splenic projector, and I had a strategy on the earth plane to change my life. And I got very obsessed with human design, which is the merging of the chakra system, the ancient Kabbalah, the ancient I Ching, and astrology, along with quantum physics. It's an incredible map, but it's simply an experiment to help you practically live a good life. I've seen many people get lost in the mind of human design, and it's not helpful if it's not in embodiment. And I've also seen people in spiritual communities who have gone into spiritual override, not been able to practically have careers and live their lives. I mean, this is very tricky stuff. It really is. I watched 2 people around and get put in mental hospitals because the vibration of the other world, it's so disorienting, and we are in such an intense 3D slow vibrational frequency here that it's very confusing. But if you'll notice, more and more people are waking up, more and more people are having these types of experiences. And I finally feel like it's safe for me to share the depth and the power of the experiences that I've had. And I hope that it opens the door for those of you who have subtle experiences and moments of feeling love, feeling bliss, and letting that door open just a little bit more. And knowing with some tools, there are many tools. Human design is just one. I also was trained in spiritual psychology. That's another. Many people do Reiki, energy work. There's all different types of tools, but there is the need to have the knowledge that it's possible. And Anne said that she was just a mirror of what's possible for all of us to wake up during these times. Why would we want to? Because when we can get out of the suffering of the mind, the suffering, and believe me, I'm not saying that I've completely removed the suffering. My mind can be a beast, okay? But I do embody the tools on the day to day. And I have days that I am living in a heaven state where I wake up, I love my clients, I love my work, I have a deep, deep connection with my animals and the land that I live on. I live on a lake. And even though I live in Southern California, it's not even a real lake. It's a beautiful, it's also very curated. I live in Irvine, and it's a curated lake. Um, but it's so beautiful, so safe, so peaceful. There's bunnies. I have a connection to all of the animals here, in particular the possums. And in human design, I am nocturnal, so it's really interesting. But there is a heaven vibe when I allow myself to get out of the suffering of the mind and I move into the splenic zone and embody those vibrational frequencies that I was able to tap into when I had my first spiritual awakening with Anne, and realized that that vibration and that frequency was available not just to me at that time, but to everyone and to me now. And it didn't just come from her. And this past couple of days, as I was kind of feeling into the need to tell this story, the vibration and the frequency and the love started to come in bigger. It started to fill my room again, started to surround me. And I started to feel the presence of both my mom and dad who've transitioned, who I had an incredible shared death experience with both of them that I'd like to share also at some point. And as I surrendered to sharing this story, I felt the connections get bigger and bigger. I could feel Gabe's presence. I could feel my parents. I could feel Anne. I could feel the light of the planet moving into my room, into this house, into my space. So I hope even if this video touches one person to feel a little bit more deeply into the light that's entering into their lives, it will be worth it for me to share. And it's also worth it because I can feel the vibration just a little bit more now because I've opened the door and honored my story in a more profound way and had gratitude for everything that's happened to me. And as you do that, it grounds a little bit more. So, for anybody who's stayed with me through this whole story, I want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing this. If you have had a spiritual experience or an awakening of any kind, I do want to hear from you. So please let me know about your story in the comments below. And I will see you in the next video. I love you. XO. XO.